moving forward with the bill. Then they'll recess at 12:30 for weekly caucus lunches and return at 2:15 Eastern for more legislative work. The House, meanwhile, live on C-SPAN, will spend the afternoon on a bill opening federal lands to hunting, fishing, and recreational shooting. A number of amendments will be considered. Live House coverage, again on C-SPAN, and live coverage now here of the U.S. Senate.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. O Lord, we know you're mighty and we're weak, but we take heart because your power makes mountains tremble. As our senators rely on your strength for this day, fill them with renewed faith and love. Give them the security and serenity they need to face today's challenges and to glorify you in their thoughts, words, and deeds. Grip them with the conviction that you will provide them with supernatural strength, vision, and guidance. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., April 17, 2012, to the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, we'll have an hour of morning business. And at that time, when that time is up around 11 o'clock, there will be 10 minutes. There will be 5 minutes on each side on the motion to reconsider the postal reform bill. So we should have a vote around 10 after 11 today. Mr. President, yesterday Senate Republicans once again rejected the idea that millionaires and billionaires should contribute their fair share to help the country prosper. Republicans sent a message to millions of honest, hardworking Americans who will file their taxes today. It's fair for Warren Buffett to pay a lower tax than his secretary, and that's not fair. Republicans said it's fair for Mitt Romney to pay a lower tax rate than his cleaning lady or his chauffeur. That's not fair. They believe, my Republican colleagues, it's fair for hedge fund managers and executives to pay a lower tax than school teachers and waitresses and bus drivers. But that's something that you don't have to take my word for it, Mr. President. That's what President Ronald Reagan called a system of unproductive tax loopholes that allow some of the truly wealthy to avoid paying their fair share. In 1985, Ronald Reagan knocked the web of loopholes, allowed people making hundreds of millions of dollars each year to pay lower tax rates than construction workers or janitors. President Reagan called it crazy, and to his credit, he worked with a couple of Democrats, Senator Bradley of New Jersey, Congressman Gephardt of Missouri, and came up with the Bradley-Gephardt Tax Fairness Act. And it worked well for a long time, but we have allowed other things to get in the way of that good Bradley-Gephardt legislation. And now we're back what Ronald Reagan was talking about those many years ago. This broken system made it possible for millionaires to pay nothing while a bus driver was paying 10% of his salary. That's what President Reagan said. But the same system is in place today, as I've just explained. And as that radical liberal Ronald Reagan said, that's just crazy. Those were his words. Yesterday, my Republican colleagues used some strong words to oppose Democrats' plan to fight the inequality. Republicans called our common sense proposal to ensure that no one making more than $1 million a year pays a lower tax rate than a truck driver, a secretary, or a police officer. They called it class warfare. Mr. President, it's not warfare, but class welfare. Welfare for the wealthy at the expense of the middle class. Class welfare, not warfare. Republicans are pushing a budget that would end Medicare as we know it, just passed the House, slashing nursing home coverage for the elderly, decimate Pell Grant funding, and kick 200,000 children out of the Head Start program. And they're calling our proposal class warfare. I wish that was the most ridiculous thing they have said about our proposal to bring a measure of fairness to America's tax system, but far from it. One member of the Senate leadership equated this measure to shooting ourselves in the head. The Paying a Fair Share Act, the Buffett rule, would have ensured millionaires and billionaires paid at least as much as their secretaries, assistants, and even their nannies. Yet Republicans think asking those lucky millionaires and billionaires to contribute their fair share is just like shooting the country in the head. That's what they said. Our legislation would have protected 99% of small business owners and maintained deductions for charitable giving. And it would have been a small but meaningful step to reduce our deficit at a time when every penny, or in this case, every billion, counts. It doesn't seem radical to me to ask Warren Buffett, who made almost $63 million in 2010, to pay a higher tax rate than his secretary. Mr. President, you can remember when he came and spoke to a group of assembled Democrats, and he carried around with him his tax returns for the last several years. He's the one that told us how much he made in 2010, and he lamented the fact that he was paying the tax rate that he was. Well, it doesn't seem radical to me. It didn't seem radical to Ronald Reagan, and it doesn't seem radical to 3/4 of the American people who support our legislation. The wealthiest Americans take home a greater percentage of the nation's income than any time in nearly a century. Yet they enjoy the lowest tax rate in more than 5 decades. The lowest tax rate. So it's no surprise Americans believe millionaires should shoulder their fair share. Even 2/3 of millionaires and a majority of Republicans around the country agree it's time to fix a system rigged to favor the richest of the rich. Republicans in Congress aren't the only ones that are on board on this issue. If you need evidence that millionaires and billionaires can afford to contribute a little more, consider this fact, Mr. President. This one simple fact. Last year, there were 7,000 people who made more than $1 million last year but didn't pay a single penny of federal income tax. Not a penny. Thanks to Republicans, these lucky millionaires and billionaires can keep gaming the system while middle-class workers keep picking up the tab. So, Mr. President, following leader remarks, as I've indicated, the Senate will be in pretty morning business until 11 o'clock. The Republicans will control the first half. The majority will control the final half. At 11, there will be 10 minutes of debate on the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to the postal reform bill. At 11:10, there will be a cloture vote, or approximately 11:10, on the motion to proceed to the postal reform bill. The Senate will recess from 12:30 and 2:15 today for our weekly caucus meetings. So we hope to make progress on the postal reform bill today, which is so vitally important to more than 500,000 workers.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
Yesterday I highlighted some of the tremendous challenges we face in our country and this President's refusal to face them with the seriousness they demand. At a moment when the federal debt makes us look a lot like Greece, President Obama spends his time running around stumping for a tax hike he knows won't help and that he knows won't pass. On gas prices, the President's response has been to call for a tax hike on energy manufacturers that, if anything, will drive the price of gas even higher and that he knows won't pass. Now we hear that the President is announcing some kind of task force on oil speculation today. In other words, the same thing Washington Democrats always call for when gas prices go up. If I were to guess, I'd say today's proposal by the President probably polls pretty well, but I guarantee it won't do a thing to lower the price of gas at the pump. It never has in the past. White House officials admit as much, so why would it now? The Democrats' favorite policy advisor, Warren Buffett, weighed in on the issue a few years ago. Here's what Warren Buffett had to say about it. Asked about the role that speculation in the oil markets plays in determining price, he said, "It's not speculation, it's supply and demand." That's Warren Buffett on speculation relating to the oil market. It's not speculation, Warren Buffett said, it's supply and demand. But of course that's not the point for this White House. President Obama only seems to care about Warren Buffett's opinion if it polls well. The President's goal here isn't to do something about the problem, it's to make people think he's doing something about the problem until the next crisis comes along. And that's the larger problem, that we've got a President who's more concerned with looking like he's doing something than in actually doing what's needed to tackle the challenges we faced. We've got a President who told us he was a different kind of politician, doing the same old things and using the same old talking points politicians in Washington have been peddling for literally years. For years. I mean, weren't these kinds of gimmicks and stale talking points precisely the kind of thing President Obama campaigned against 4 years ago? I thought he was offering something new, something different. I think the Associated Press summed up the President's latest proposal pretty well this morning. The White House plan, which Obama was to unveil Tuesday, the AP said, is more likely to draw sharp election year distinctions with Republicans than to have an immediate effect on prices at the pump. Well, AP pretty well summed it up. They said it's more about drawing a distinction. Look, we don't need new distinctions. We need solutions. Americans need lawmakers who are more concerned with facing up to the problems we face than getting reelected. They need a President who thinks about solving a problem. A President who thinks solving a problem involves more than giving a speech about it and pointing the finger at whatever doesn't poll well that particular day. As I said yesterday, the President seems to have forgotten why he was elected in the first place. He seems to have forgotten his own campaign rhetoric, that he was going to be different, that he would bridge differences, that he would bring people together. The reality couldn't be more different or more disappointing. The sad truth is it's all politics all the time in this White House. They're out of ideas. They've got nothing new to offer. Today's announcement is all the proof you need of that. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 11 a.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first half and the majority controlling the final half.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, over the weekend, the United States, Britain, France, China, Russia, and Germany returned to the negotiating table with Iran for the first time since January 2011. Reports indicate modest progress was made, and a second round of talks has now been scheduled for May. While these negotiations represent an opportunity to achieve a peaceful outcome regarding Iran's nuclear program, the United States and our allies must guard against Iranian delays. Iran has a history of using negotiations as a stalling tactic, and while our negotiators talk, the centrifuges keep spinning. And that is the crux of the problem. Iran's nuclear program continues. According to the most recent report in February from the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has produced more than 5,400 kilograms of low-enriched uranium and more than 100 kilograms of uranium enriched to a level of 20%. Enriching uranium to a level of 20% represents an 85 to 90% of the work needed to reach weapons-grade fuel. Iran is also preparing additional cascades used to produce enriched uranium, which will accelerate the speed at which it can stockpile nuclear material. In total, Iran has enriched enough uranium that, upon further processing, it could build 3 to 4 nuclear weapons. In response to Iran's continued nuclear program and its defiance of the United Nations Security Council resolutions, the United States and many of our allies have adopted sanctions on Iran. Sanctions are having a significant impact on the Iranian economy. In March, Iran's oil exports fell nearly 300,000 barrels per day, or 12%, according to foreign reports. Iran's currency has lost roughly half its value in the past year, and inflation is more than 20%. The new European Union sanctions are scheduled to take effect this summer that would make it even more difficult for Iran to ship oil globally. Once the EU sanctions go into effect in July, the Congressional Research Service estimates that oil sales could fall up to 40%. In addition, a major Chinese insurance provider has announced it will no longer insure ships carrying Iranian oil. These are important developments that will increase economic pressure on the Iranian regime. Yet neither sanctions nor past negotiations have stopped Iran's nuclear program and its quest for nuclear weapons. Iran's nuclear program threatens American interests. First, Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons increased the risk of global nuclear proliferation, which would jeopardize the security of the United States. The last two nations to acquire nuclear weapons, Pakistan and North Korea, have presented numerous challenges to American security interests. North Korea provoked an international condemnation just last week when it launched its rockets. In Pakistan, a December report in The Atlantic called into question the security of that country's nuclear arsenal, stating that Pakistan regularly transports nuclear weapons throughout its city streets without much security. If Iran obtains a nuclear weapon, other nations in the Middle East may soon follow. Saudi Arabia has already said it will consider seeking nuclear capabilities if Iran's program is not stopped. Second, a nuclear Iran could increase support for terrorism. Iran is already one of the world's leading state sponsors of terrorism, funneling money and weapons and supporting training for terrorist groups including Hezbollah and Hamas. With a nuclear weapon, Iran and its terrorist allies may be emboldened to carry out even more attacks. Furthermore, what would prevent Iran from giving nuclear weapons, sharing its capabilities with one of the terrorist groups? Third, a nuclear Iran could exert more influence over world oil markets. A direct link exists between volatile oil prices and Iran's nuclear program. Prices have risen when tensions increase, and when tensions recede, prices typically decline. American consumers and businesses are directly affected by these volatile prices that negatively impact our economic well-being. Although Saudi Arabia has pledged to boost production to make up for the loss of Iranian oil on the market, this will reduce that spare production capacity and leave our country and global economies vulnerable to any reduction in supplies, whether from conflicts within oil-producing nations or natural disasters. And finally, a nuclear Iran would threaten the safety of American troops now serving abroad in the Middle East. For years, Iran has fought an American presence in the Middle East and has supported terrorist groups that have targeted and killed American troops. American officials believe Iran supported the terrorists responsible for the 1996 attack on U.S. military residents in Saudi Arabia that killed 19 of our servicemen. Iran also has long-range missiles that could hit U.S. military bases in the regions, including ones in Turkey, Afghanistan, Bahrain, and Kuwait. And Iran's nuclear program also threatens the existence of our ally Israel. The president of Iran has called for Israel to be, quote, wiped off the map. If Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, its leaders will have the capability to do the destructive things they speak of. Understandably, Israel is worried. Israelis know all too well the price of war because they have witnessed that war and destruction. They know what can happen when evil men gain the ability to carry out evil deeds. While some would have us believe that Iran is Israel's problem, we should not be fooled. Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens all nations who care about global peace and stability. We cannot leave Israel to deal with this crisis alone. American leadership is needed now more than ever to stop Iran. We can begin by passing the Iran Sanctions Accountability and Human Rights Act. This legislation, which came through the Banking Committee earlier this year, on which I serve, strengthens and expands existing sanctions and for the first time makes it official U.S. policy to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. The administration and President Obama must fully enforce U.S. law and penalize those that violate U.S. sanctions. In addition, the United States should use current negotiations to bring about an end to Iran's nuclear programs. As a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran must adhere to its obligations under that treaty and provide transparency to international inspectors. The longer Iran's nuclear program continues, the greater the danger grows for the United States and all nations. Last month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke here in Washington. He is an incredible leader, and his speech to Congress last year was one of the best I've ever heard. While speaking in Washington last month, he laid out a very clear reason why a nuclear Iran would be such a grave danger. And he said he'd been warning the world for 15 years about a nuclear Iran, 15 years of warnings. We must not be fooled by negotiations that only stall and continue to create the opportunity for greater disaster down the road. The Prime Minister said no one would be happier than him if Iran gave up its nuclear quest. But there are many around the world who would be happy because we know the world would be a far safer, more peaceful place without a nuclear Iran. While we all desire peaceful resolution, negotiations must not be a stalling tactic or an excuse for inaction. Thursday this week is Holocaust Remembrance Day. As we pause to remember and reflect on this past tragedy, the United States must act to prevent a nuclear Iran and the real possibility of a future tragedy. The world cannot, again, look the other way. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Connor.
And the Senate in a quorum call waiting for members to come to the floor in this hour of morning business. At about 11 a.m., senators scheduled to debate changes to the U.S. Postal Service. They'll discuss closing post offices and other postal facilities, changing from a 6-day delivery to 5 days a week, and refunding overpayments to the Postal Retirement Fund. The senators then will vote on moving forward with the bill. They'll recess at 12:30 for weekly caucus lunches, returning at 2:15 Eastern for more legislative work. Meantime, the House, live on C-SPAN, will spend the afternoon on a bill opening federal lands to hunting, fishing, and recreational shooting. Number of amendments will be considered. You can watch live House coverage. They are in a period of general speeches at this moment. You can watch live House coverage on our companion network, C-SPAN. On C-SPAN 3, a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee hearing underway on racial profiling in the U.S. It's being chaired by Senator Benjamin Cardin, Democrat of Maryland, and you can watch that live on C-SPAN 3 here on C-SPAN 2, waiting for members to come to the floor of the United States Senate.
consent that the roll call be initiated. Without objection. I rise today to introduce an amendment that would end aid to Egypt until they end the prosecution of our U.S. citizens. I offered this amendment earlier this spring when Egypt was detaining our citizens, these pro-democracy workers, and was not letting them leave the country. Since then, they have let them leave the country, but sort of in an insulting fashion, in the sense that they have let them leave when we had to pay basically ransom. We had to pay about $5 million in ransom, $300,000 per person to let these people leave Egypt. So they came home, and Egypt still could only get its aid if the administration certified that they were pro-democracy. Within days, Secretary Clinton did release the aid and said that they were achieving their democratic goals. I wrote a letter to Secretary Clinton asking her not to do this because the prosecution still goes on. These American citizens that were allowed to leave the country had to pay $300,000 in bail, but they were also had to sign a statement saying they're coming back for the trial. Now, everybody kind of said, well, I doubt they're ever going back to Egypt for these show trials. But then it gets worse. It turns out that in December of last year, President Obama signed an executive order. This is Order 13524 that gives Interpol, the international police organization, gives them immunity in our country. We also have an extradition treaty with Egypt, meaning that if you're accused of a crime in Egypt, we can send you back. The danger is are these pro-democracy workers safe in the United States? You have Interpol agents in the United States who now have immunity. We have an extradition treaty with Egypt. There are definitely problems to allowing this to go on. This is an indication to me that maybe Egypt is not pursuing democratic goals, and maybe certifying them as a democratic country is not in our best interest, and maybe sending nearly $2 billion of taxpayer money to Egypt, who continues to prosecute our citizens, is not a good idea. I'll give you an example of what Interpol is doing. Interpol recently took a Saudi journalist from Malaysia and sent him back to Saudi Arabia. Do you know what the crime was? They're accused of blasphemy. They're accused of a religious crime of apostasy. Do you know what the penalty in Saudi Arabia is for blasphemy? The death penalty. So we're now using an international police agency to go into a sovereign nation, someone's accused of a religious crime, and sent back to a country where they can be put to death. This alarms me. Now, people say, oh, that could never happen in America. Well, right now the President has allowed Interpol, through an executive order, through the President's signature, has allowed Interpol to have diplomatic immunity in our country. So for all I know, Interpol could be at this very moment looking for American citizens in this country and trying to get those people and extradite them back to Egypt. This is a problem. This is why you don't want an international police force to operate within your sovereign nation. There can be cooperation, but you don't want impunity and immunity for an international police force within your borders. So I will introduce again an amendment to this bill, and this amendment will say no aid to Egypt until they end this prosecution. No aid to Egypt until they end these red-letter warrants that they've asked on U.S. citizens to be extradited back to Egypt. We can't allow U.S. citizens to be sent to a foreign country to be tried in a country where blasphemy is a crime. Those are not American values, those are not American ways, and we can't allow U.S. citizens to be subject to foreign laws and foreign crimes. So I will ask today for a vote on an amendment that will end Egyptian aid, or at least delay Egyptian foreign aid, until they relinquish this persecution of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back my time.
Absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.